Hello and welcome to another episode of EMJ's new haematology podcast, Hema Now, with me, your host, Dr. Jonathan Sackier. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Professor Antonio Almeida, Director of the Clinical Haematology Service of Hospital da Luz, Lisbon, Portugal, and the 2024 President of the European Haematology Association, or EHA. After obtaining his medical degree from Cambridge University in 1993 and specialist training in haematology in 2002, he subsequently went on to complete a clinical fellowship at Imperial College, London in 2007. Nowadays, he heads a haematology department in Lisbon and is the founding dean of Católica Medical School. As the president of EHA, Antonio is actively involved in several initiatives within the Congress, such as the Young EHA Mentorship Mixer.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you for inviting me back.
So I should tell folks, really, that I'm very nervous doing this podcast because we attempted to record it the other day. And I was so engaged as we started to talk, and I had a cup of one of my favorite hot beverages, Bovril, and I wasn't looking where I put it down and managed to throw it all over my computer. So thank you for your grace in coming back as I endeavor to record this on a new computer. So, Antonio, my colleagues at EMJ were pleased to interview you recently for the upcoming EMJ Haematology Journal, and it was great to read about the variety of sessions planned for this year's EHA Congress. Having now attended it, what sessions or topics or, how you did the whole thing, what particularly stood out for you?
Well, Jonathan, I think before we even talk about the Congress content, one of the most impressive parts of this Congress is that it was the biggest EHA Congress ever. Now, EHA for many years has been the second largest hematology Congress of the year. There is the American Society of Hematology Congress normally in December, and we run in June. And this year we had over 18,000 registered participants.
Good Lord.
With 15,500 on site. So that is impressive in itself. But equally impressive is the fact that we've had a record number of abstracts submitted. We had over 3,000 abstracts submitted, of which very few were rejected. So it's quite an impressive turnout and quite an impressive commitment from the whole hematology community to our Congress. And I was particularly happy with that. Also, we were very lucky to have held it in Madrid this year, which not only is a great city, but has a great conference center, quite compact despite having the space for so many people. And so it really created a very amicable atmosphere and a very collaborative atmosphere.
That's such an important thing, and I wish Congress organizers would think about the humanity, especially post-COVID. I used to go to the American College of Surgeons meeting, which was a great opportunity, mostly for the collegial interactions as well as the science and seeing what was happening in industry and pharmaceuticals. But one of the places, the city shall remain nameless. It's like a barn, and it just sucks the life out of you. If you go somewhere that's got some character, that's a great thing. But thanks for making that observation. I'll check out Madrid.
Obviously, I'm European. I'm president of the European Haematology Association, so I'm a fan of Europe. But I think that is really one of the huge pluses of Europe, is that almost everywhere you go is an attractive place to go. But the other interesting fact is that we did a recent survey of our members of what they valued most about the association. And obviously, they all value the educational opportunities, which are in Congress, but also on our website, etc. But one of the things that members value the most is exactly what you're referring to, is the opportunity to link in, to be with other people, to meet other people. And if we create good conditions in Congress and in other meetings for people to come together and to interact, I think we're paying a great service to the medical community. Now, going back to the content, I think the Congress was particularly exciting, as I said, because a lot of people submitted abstracts, and we had some great trials presented, groundbreaking trials in myeloma, groundbreaking trials in sickle cell disease. And the other exciting part is that we had a huge variety of topics. In the presidential symposium, we spanned everything from malignant hematology, myeloproliferative neoplasms, AML, to red cell disorders such as sickle cell disease, to clotting disorders in pregnant women. And so, really, it catered for everybody in the hematology community. We had big workshops on diagnostics of myeloid and lymphoid malignancies, and those are hugely popular, not only with the clinicians, but also with the scientists that work in hematology diagnostics. And hematology is such a diverse field, ranging from clinical to diagnosis to research, that has a very close translational link to back to clinical, that it's great to see more and more scientists participating. And we were able to intersperse the more basic science sessions with the clinical sessions. And I think that was huge added value for everybody.
Yeah, your specialty really is diverse, and it's going to be a theme of this conversation about how it's changed, certainly in my professional lifetime, and yours dramatically, which must make it so exciting. You know, when I was involved in helping design and organize national and international congresses, I always enjoyed the post-congress review when we'd perform an autopsy, if you will, on what had gone well, what hadn't gone well, what people were talking about. Looking forward to the next Congress, are there any planned changes that you can tell us about? Obviously, they may be under wraps, but planned approaches, the things that you're going to do differently, or things that you took from this year's Congress that you're going to say, yeah, that worked, we want more of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's starting with what we'll keep, and that obviously the post-Congress reviews are very important for continuous improvement. We're definitely keeping the variety of topics and keeping the specialized workshops and keeping the scientific, basic science sessions interspersed with the clinical sessions. We had two very interesting formats, in which one was a sort of Colosseum type of format, with the spectators sat in a circle with the chairs in the center. And these were organized mainly for debates, and that was very popular. And I think it went very well, because debates can be quite daunting if you're on a stage with people looking at you, whereas if you're within a circle, they become much more of a discussion of a topic rather than a more aggressive political type debate. And I think everybody enjoyed that format and was able to communicate more. The other thing that we will keep is this hybrid format. We now, since COVID, we've had both live streaming and also kept the Congress material available for all the participants until the 15th of August. And that has been very popular. We saw when you're on stage and you're the chair, you have this little screen which tells you how many people are online. And there are always about 500, 600 people online watching any one session. And that is in addition to the people in the room. So that really means that people can participate more and more. They can ask questions online. They can make comments, and they can actually watch the sessions wherever they are. So I think that's definitely a keeper. And finally, obviously, the variety of topics. Now, one thing that I did mention is that we had a record number of participants and a record number of abstracts. And we recognize that we do need to increase the space for these presentations. We do need to increase the number of posters that can be presented, the number of oral sessions of abstracts that are presented. And so, in that respect, next year's Congress will be a little bit longer. We're changing the format and the time, and I won't spoil the whole surprise, but the Congress will be a little bit longer. It will start with the opening session with a bang, and then we will have more space for oral abstracts, more space for posters. And really, the whole idea is that we get our members in the hematology community to participate more. We want it to be a more horizontal structure with a less sort of top-down, here are the famous lecturers and there you are listening to them, to be able to provide a more networking experience which everybody appreciates.
So here's your opportunity for an advertisement, and we'll stick it in the show notes, but tell people the dates that they need to know to remember to register, where it's going to be, so on and so forth.
So next year's Congress is in another great city. It's in Milan. and it's going to run it's always in the second weekend of June, so you can actually book your calendar for the next few years. But this one's going to run from the 12th of June to the 16th of June 2025 in Milan.
Yeah. So check out your Italian recipe books. Absolutely. So, Antonio, a role that I loved when I was involved in one of the surgical societies was to chair the education committee, the continuing education committee. And you mentioned COVID, and I know that between 2019 and 22, which was that period of time is firmly embedded in all our brains. You were chairman of the EHA Educational Committee. Talk to us about your proudest accomplishment. It's easy for me to say. Your proudest accomplishments, the things you achieved in that role, and how you see education in hematology changing post-COVID. You've already mentioned the large number of remote attendees you had, which, of course, in these financially challenging times, it can be difficult for people from certain parts of the world to travel to these sort of events. So it's important, and I think we've learned a lot. So proudest accomplishments, and where you think education is going in your specialty.
Well, education really is one of the pillars of EHA. And as I mentioned earlier, it's certainly one of the aspects that our members value the most, and they come to us the most. So it's something that we invest very heavily on. And I've been involved in education with the EHA even long before I was chair of the education committee. I think from 2007, I've been involved in education in EHA, and it's really transformed admirably. I think we were the first to have a curriculum for hematology, which not only lists the topics that we expect hematology trainees in Europe to know, but also indicates the depth of knowledge that should be attained in each of the topics. And this is very helpful, and I think everybody finds this a very useful tool, not only to check on themselves, but also for us to be able to hang on this tree, so to say, all the educational material. Now, traditionally, we had a very presential style educational plan with lots of small meetings, thematic meetings, etc. And these are still present and important. And we're currently developing a very nice collaboration with the European School of Haematology for these monothematic meetings. But one thing that we really have developed, and I'm very proud in EHA, has been the campus. The online campus is a repository of educational material in which we have everything from huge, quite long courses on diseases that go from the pathophysiology to diagnosis to treatment to complications, to small clinical cases, small spot diagnostic cases. We have material on social networks, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, which people can self-test, and these are freely available. And so all these variety of formats have really made education very accessible to everybody, no matter what stage of their career they are, and no matter how much time they have to dedicate to their own education. We also have set up the European Haematology exam, and I'm very, very proud of that. It was very much a bottom-up initiative in that the national societies and the members wanted to have a European exam that would reflect the European curriculum. And this has been so popular that some countries, such as Switzerland, have adopted it as their national exam. So they do not devise their own exam. They use our own. They use the EHA exam, and it is their official theory exam, and then they have a practical competence-based assessment. So it's really been a very, very successful trajectory. And finally, I think what I'm also very proud of is that we've been very innovative in implementing novel educational methods in our educational program. So we have a whole section of very much problem-based peer-to-peer learning, which we call the masterclass, in which participants work in groups to solve problems throughout a year. We have a lot of self-testing and progress testing throughout the whole program. And we also have introduced a lot of different media, from podcasts to videos to cases that people can adapt and use in their own education. So I would say educationalism and assessment have really been driving forces that have made me very proud. Well, think the biggest challenge, like with everything that you have online, is how do you get people to go to you? What made WhatsApp overcome Viber, for example, and that I think really is still the biggest challenge. Obviously, I will not hide our ambition, and what we set up is that we want to be the one-stop shop for hematology education wherever you are, and to actually cater and provide for that is a challenge. Producing material is also quite challenging, and here I must pay homage to the huge efforts the office in The Hague have made in increasing their team and bringing in specialized medical writers, even hematologists, to work with them to be able to produce all the material and have enough going. And finally, I think engaging members in education. These societies are all very exciting, but the more you engage the members, the more you get out of it. And I think that is what we're really working on now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've already mentioned income levels and challenges of travel and all those sort of things which impact everyone. So, moving into some more clinical based conversations, Antonio, I understand that you supervise weekly clinics with special interest in myelodysplastic and myeloproliferative syndromes. Can you talk to us a bit about the way these conditions are treated nowadays and how things have changed during the course of your career? Yes, our audience is primarily going to be hematologists, but I'm guessing some of them won't see these conditions in their practice. And we also have other clinicians who are listening because they're, oh, I wonder what's going on in the world of hematology. So you have the floor.
Well, I think the thing that really attracted to me to hematology was first the heterogeneity and the breadth of its action. So, as a hematology clinician, not only do I see the patient, but I also go into the lab and actively diagnose. I am the one who reads the bone marrows. I am the one who liaises with the histopathologist reading the trophines. We are the ones who decide what other special tests need to be done, and we actually run the labs where these special tests are done, from cytogenetics to flow cytometry to molecular biology. And that part is really exciting because it does mean that everything that is new comes into routine clinical use with amazing speed. And so in my career, which some younger members may think is quite long, but I finished my hematology training in 2002. And even in these years, I have seen diseases such as chronic myeloid leukemia going from having a prognosis of 3 to 5 years survival after diagnosis to having a normal life expectancy with the introduction of specific tyrosine kinase inhibitors that to treat patients with CML. And that is just amazing to live through. The same happens in myeloproliferative neoplasms, with the JAK2 mutations being discovered as the driver, and all the treatment options from JAK2 inhibition to other things like pegylated interferon coming into practice and changing the prognosis of these patients. And this is seen almost everywhere throughout hematology. We have new treatments. I would almost hesitate to say almost too many new treatments that sometimes we don't know what to choose. What do you give a patient? I mean, myeloma is a typical case, and there seems to be a new drug coming out every month almost. But this is great for patients and it's great for us. And I think with such easily accessible material, because obviously blood being liquid, it's easy to access and easy to analyze, we have very easily access to very deep knowledge about the disease and the pathophysiology, and also how we can have targeted treatments. And I think the whole targeted treatment aspect is becoming more and more the vogue in hematology and in other areas of medicine, but very particularly in hematology.
No, thank you for that lovely summary. And similarly, we've got an international audience here, Antonio, and certain diseases are more common in Southern Europe, where you live and practice, than elsewhere. I remember when I was training in Britain, there were still gas lamps on the street and horse-drawn carriages. But I'd never seen a case of sickle cell anemia going through my training. Now, of course, the population has changed in Britain, but when I moved to the United States, I saw multiple cases of sickle cell as it impacted things that I was dealing with as a surgeon. So I think that although we are now much more international, things like hemoglobinopathies may not be familiar to everyone. Can you similarly give us a 30,000-foot view of where things are with with these conditions, the developments in this space?
Thank you for mentioning that, Jonathan. And what you pointed out is really at the heart of what we want to do at EHA. In fact, we have two topics in focus. One is precision medicine, which I've mentioned in quite some detail just before, and the other are hemoglobinopathies. Now, hemoglobinopathies are obviously very constricted to some ethnic groups, Africa, Indian subcontinent, Southern Europe, some areas of the Far East. But with migration, they are very prevalent everywhere in the world. And this means that, especially with the recent migration trends, places such as the Nordic countries, Sweden, Norway, who are receiving many migrants from the Middle East and from Southern Europe and from Africa, are starting to see patients with hemoglobinopathies where they never did. And this really pushes home the message that we do need to provide education and help to treat these patients wherever they are, and also to invest in research. Unfortunately, most of these patients come from areas in the world where there are not enough funds to have adequate research, and this also means that the research in hemoglobinopathies is notoriously underfunded compared to hematological malignancies. So, in our topic in focus, we have really three big areas. One is dedicated research grants. So people who have a research project in hemoglobinopathies have a sort of ring-fenced grant to which they can apply to get funding for their research. The second is education and support. So we really want to ensure that the community has not only courses and educational material, but active guidelines into how to approach patients with hemoglobinopathies, how to approach populations at risk, such as screening and what can be offered in terms of screening, prenatal and antenatal screening, and also neonatal screening, and also what can be offered in terms of genetic counseling, because very often this does not happen if physicians are not aware. And then we have active educational programs that bring physicians and scientists who do not know and want to learn more about hemoglobinopathies to centers of excellence. Now, there are regions in Europe, such as London and other regions in the UK, Paris, and also Greece, that have quite a high prevalence of hemoglobinopathies and a lot of experience, who collaborate quite a lot with other countries. And we have set up a preceptorship program, including several centers in these areas with high prevalence, where hematologists can go and spend a week and learn about hemoglobinopathies. The third is the support to underfunded areas, underfunded regions. And by this, I don't mean just outside Europe. Even in Southern Europe and in Eastern Europe, there are many underfunded regions that require more support in optimizing blood supply, optimizing drug access to improve care for patients with hemoglobinopathies. Having said that, we are living a particularly exciting time. There are many, many new drugs, both for sickle cell disease and for thalassemia, and exceptional new strategies such as gene editing and gene therapy that are being used very successfully. So hopefully these will become increasingly more accessible to patients, and we'll see more and more benefits.
The issues is that these new therapies cost a lot of money to develop and cost a lot of money to deliver. And because of the locations where the incidence of these conditions is higher, one might have issues with access from cost. And I'm not expecting you to have some ready-made answer for that, but it's a big challenge, isn't it?
It is a big challenge. And I think the other big challenge that as a medical community we need to deliver is who has an indication for these therapies. Obviously, as a patient, family, and even as a physician, we want to give the best, the most efficacious therapy to everybody. But sometimes that is not needed. Sometimes that is a step too far. I think one of the missions of our guidelines is really to establish the groups that will benefit more from each therapy so that the very expensive therapies are available for those who really need it, and the more accessible therapies are available to all.
Yeah,
But yes, there's no magic rule there
yeah,
other than
yeah.
it's being systematic.
It's our strengths are our weaknesses in life. We develop all these amazing new treatments in different specialties, and then we've got to somehow work out how we're going to pay for them. In my country, you spent a lot of time here. The NHS was launched 75 years ago, where the population size, the population makeup, the disease profile, and the treatment profiles were entirely different. And I have some very they always say about surgeons that we're always certain, we're occasionally right. I have a lot of things I'm very certain about the NHS and healthcare delivery systems in general, but I don't think we're going to solve that here. I know that you serve on several registries for paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, chronic myeloid leukemia, myelodysplastic syndrome. How have these groups and the cross-border fertilizations that they imply move the needle on covering more about these diseases, improving awareness about diagnosis, treatment, and so on and so forth? Better collaborations, maybe.
Even more, I think these data platforms are what's now commonly called as big data networks. They are going to really change the way that we gather evidence and that we test drugs. I have very that we gather clinical evidence. I have very little doubt. We've seen that already. I mean, the PNH registry, which I participated in, was instrumental by collecting post-approval data to get more indications for complement inhibition, to extend that into the pediatrics, to extend that into other indications within PNH. And so to be able to have such a rich collection of I don't like the term, but I fail to have a better one, of real world data, is very, very valuable. But not only that, I think more and more agencies like the FDA and the European Medicines Agency are looking at registry data, and if registry data is big enough, then it loses that sort of the bias that is intrinsic of data collected from decisions made on the clinical scenario. They're looking at registry data again for approval for comparator arms. And even more exciting, in EHA, we're really looking into that, and we're collaborating with other scientists in the area, is to use that registry data to generate synthetic data. Now, this is a little bit sort of brave new world and high informatics, but in essence, from my understanding, what these AI geniuses do is that they get the different data points from all the patients and they permutate them so that they create from 100 patients 10,000 patients.
Yeah.
And then you can use that as a comparator arm for clinical trials, which means that when you enter patients into a clinical trial, you are only giving them the active drug. The guys who get placebo are the ones from the computer. And I think that would be very valuable and make access much quicker. So registries are very, very important in summary. And EHA does and will do a lot to stimulate them and to ensure that we get the right data, the right quality data, to be able to use them properly in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And the other effect, of course, is speed. Speed to market. And if you're a pharmaceutical company, every day that your compound that you've spent a fortune developing isn't generating revenue, is costing you money, and decaying patent life and so on and so forth, all the negatives. And hopefully for patients, it makes it not only easier to access, but less expensive. So you've mentioned AI, and I'd like to continue that theme. I've seen lots of AI platforms. I've been playing with one myself, where people are using AI, for instance, to evaluate CT scans for people with lung cancer to see if can you can you ascertain which patients will and will not respond to very expensive and toxic drugs. What other things are you doing in hematology with AI?
Well, we have a whole task force of using AI in hematology.
Why am I not surprised?
One of the areas we look at is exactly what you're describing: is AI for diagnostics. So imaging is a very clear application, but we're using that for morphology as well. So we're starting to use AI to look at bone marrow smears, bone marrow trophines, lymph node biopsies. And as we load more and more data, then it's able to recognize patterns and accelerate diagnostics. And even in many ways, reduce the need for additional stains and for additional tests that may be needed. The other big area is with all the information now that we have on genomics, especially with next generation sequencing, and we do whole genome sequencing, etc., is using AI to analyze this and to identify different mutational, or even if they're not mutational, different polymorphisms and patterns of polymorphisms that will identify populations of patients that benefit from differential treatments. And I think that would be very powerful. And finally, as I've mentioned before, we're definitely investing in AI for registry analysis and for improving data for drug approval and accelerating drug approval.
Yeah.
So as I say, it's a very exciting, brave new world that's coming up.
Yeah, I just like all these sort of exciting topics, they get misrepresented in public discussion forums, and it becomes an echo chamber, and everyone becomes deeply paranoid. I think it would be very, very useful for us as physicians to do a better job educating the public about how these things are helping us, because it's been sort of redacted down to doctors are going to be replaced by AI, and these sort of blanket statements and dismissing everything, or AI is going to, a la Terminator movie, we're all going to die. So yeah, there's great positives to come from it. Talk to us a little bit about public policy and the role it plays in shaping the future of your specialty, and how can hematologists more effectively engage in advocacy efforts? Because we've seen that, in the breast cancer space, the women advocating for things like Herceptin, for more robust genetic testing, for more availability of screening, for better coverage for breast cancer research. They've done a magnificent job. And men, I think, have been, a bit slothful, frankly, in comparison. What about your specialty?
Well, we're much smaller by comparison, so our voice is necessarily much quieter. But it is one of the most important actions that we have as an association and also as a hematology community, is to ensure that especially the rare disease world has a voice and is seen and recognized. Because one of the big issues that we have when we deal with rare diseases is not just that people don't think about them and then they get diagnosed late and they're difficult to treat, is that the treatments, because they are focused at a smaller population, are much more expensive and much less accessible. And all of this also comes with very sophisticated diagnostics. So we, as an association, do a lot of work with the European Commission and with the European Medicines Agency to ensure, first of all, that the decisions they make are make sense to doctors. I think one thing that many of us as doctors don't realize is that we have things like the Innovative Medicines Initiative, the device regulations, and we think these things happen at a level above us, but then they have direct impact on our day-to-day life. So we need to make sure that we gather the experts around the table and that at these they advise the politicians of how the policy should be set. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that we are at the table when prices are decided and when access is decided, and not just prices, but also when indications of medicines are decided. As you know well, pharmaceuticals will do a trial, and that will be the indication for that drug, but it may work in many other diseases. And if it's not in the indication, then it's difficult to get access. So we do work hard to ensure that happens. But I say it's much harder work in the rare disease world because our voice is not as loud as it is in breast cancer, for example.
Yeah, but it's highly emotive. I mean,
Highly.
I have a friend in the United States who did a lot of work for advocacy for some pediatric inborn errors of metabolism diseases, POMPA and such like. Very, very impressive because you could tell very powerful stories. Human beings communicate because of stories. We tell stories, and that's how we affect um, uh, beliefs. And if you affect beliefs, you affect behaviors. So the best of luck with that. In 2017, I want to switch topics again. You became the founding dean of a new medical school, for which I commend you. I mean, you're a brave guy, and you have various international links. It's quite an undertaking, my dear chap. Tell us about the inspiration, your guiding principles for this new institution. And I believe the first students matriculated just 2 3 years back, I believe.
Oh, not yet. No, no. So we're opening the fourth year now.
Okay.
So I have another 3 years to have graduates. But
Yes, but
I mean,
matric.
this is
Maybe I've used the wrong word. They.
oh yes, no, no.
Right.
They matriculate. Yes,
Yeah.
sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
So they matriculate in 2020, and they will graduate in 27. So I mean, it's I think it was a huge opportunity. I remember when I mentioned this within the board of EHA that I was invited to do this. Well, one of our colleagues from Finland said, "You hardly ever get an opportunity to do that. You can't say no to that." Because obviously, I was, as you rightly mentioned, quite daunted by the prospect. Now, this medical school was born out of a partnership between the university, Portuguese Catholic University, and the hospital I work in. So this hospital is going to be the Hospital da Luz is going to be the university hospital, and we decided to implement the international curriculum that is read at Maastricht University. Now, this is quite a modern curriculum in terms of education. All the disciplines are integrated, which means our students will not learn anatomy, physiology, biochemistry separate. They will learn about circulation and breathing, or they will learn about how the body moves and thinks. So all the anatomy, the physiology, all of that is integrated in one. And then in the whole method is very much based on problem-based learning and on active student learning. And it's been an amazing experience to see how active the students are in learning, how enthusiastic they are about this. And I know this all sounds very lyrical, but actually, it's when you meet the parents here and there and everywhere, and they say, "What do you do to my child that he just wants to go to university? He loves going there. He finds it so exciting." And that's probably the most gratifying thing of all. And in that respect, it's also been gratifying to see how really all the teachers, because like me, they were all brought up in a very traditional top down lecture style teaching atmosphere to be able to do all this teacher training and to have everybody buy into the new methodology and be excited by it. So I think what really brought me in was obviously the possibility to create a new school where we're actually training doctors and professionals, not training scientists full of knowledge, but to feel that our students will come out ready to be professionals in the world and not just with lots of medical knowledge.
Well, I think with your enthusiasm for learning and for pushing the boundaries and being involved in this wonderful profession we're privileged to be involved with, I'm sure that your students will be very, very blessed. Antonio, we have one more question. I always like to ask this and pretend that you're walking along the beach one day and you kick a bottle and you pick it up and rub it, and out pops a genie and offers you 3 wishes to improve the world of hematology. What might your wishes be?
Wow, yeah, I think we need to think big if we have 3 wishes. Well,
Absolutely.
well, certainly, I think the one of the most important wishes to have a better link between diagnostics and clinical hematology. I think as diagnostics becomes more and more automated, it's very easy that diagnostics becomes that black box that doesn't speak to clinicians. And to bring that closer to hematology and have hematologists participate more actively in diagnostics is one big dream. The second big dream is to increase access of diagnostics and of treatment to everybody. And I think that is, I mean, that sounds pretty obvious, but in a specialty which is renowned for being the most expensive specialty in the world and which affects so many populations, such as in hemoglobinopathies that are underprivileged, this is a really very tall order. And I think the third wish is to be that everybody else sees what a spectacular specialty hematology is, rather than having us sometimes in our little ivory tower and nobody knows about us. And I think bringing hematology and our whole philosophy of integrated medicine to the world would be very important.
Hmm. Well, hopefully you'll go for that walk and you'll find that bottle and you can have your wishes. Sadly, that's all we've got time for today, but I'd really like to thank you, Professor Antonio Almeida, for number one, taking the time to talk to us twice. This time I avoided fritzing my computer. Um, and not only for everything you're doing for EHA and the world of hematology, but doubtless for the patients that you look after who must be thrilled to have you as their doctor. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for inviting me.
So, folks, thanks for listening to this episode of Hema Now. If you've enjoyed listening, and I guess if you're watching this part, you definitely have, please subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode. And check out our archives. There's going to be lots of great episodes in there. And please tell your colleagues, tell your friends, like us on social media. You know the drill. So until next time, please stay safe, stay well, stay curious. Bye for now.